Hey guys, Jordan from Precondo. Let's talk about this guy here who just took a $429,000 bath on his Scarborough bungalow. So this individual here purchased this home in Scarborough for $1.41 million back in February of last year. Our market peak, widely accepted anyways as our market peak. Of course, prices have head down rapidly since then, and they're rebounding a little bit in the past few months, but we'll get into that shortly. So this is, $429,000 bath. 30% decrease. Now that's not typical, right? Most markets are down 15, maybe 20%, depending on where you are. The further you get from the core, usually the worse you've been hit. But with that said, this property is tenanted, and I think that's a big part of the reason why it's sold for what it's sold for, right? Buyers don't usually want to deal with tenanted properties, and that's what I tell people when they're selling. Ideally, we sell this thing untenanted if we want to maximize value. Now, at the same time as that sale, of course, I have to show a bullish sale because that's what I do. So this unit was purchased in July of last year for $655,000, okay? And it just sold 11 days ago for $995,000. So it's up 50% in like less than a year, right? But the unit was renovated. So I'm going to hop over to House Sigma, show you some pictures. I'll probably have to blur out the address and all the specifics because real estate boards think this stuff is top secret information and I'm not allowed to share it. But you guys can find it on your own. So you can see here, beautifully renovated. You got the wide plank, all white kitchen, the renovator standard, Fisher Paykel. If we look at the old unit here, you can see that it was old. So somebody pumped $80,000, $100,000 into this unit, something like that. Feels right to me. But if somebody renovates homes far more frequently than me, then you can correct me in the comments. Certainly, it didn't cost $340,000 to renovate a condo where you can't do anything structural, right? So what's going on? You've got huge losses at the same time as huge gains. What exactly is going on? Well, when we look at the HPI, so the housing price index, sort of the grandpapa, the overarching indicator of where prices are, you can see that they are trending up, right? So it's no secret that in the last 6 weeks, multiple offers have been kicking up. Buyer activity has been kicking up. And look, part of this is seasonality, right? It is to be expected that the spring market's going to be hotter than your January, your February. But there's a second factor, I think, and that is the fact that we haven't had any further rate hikes. Now, we haven't had any further rate hikes. We haven't had rate cuts, right? But you shift demand because everybody's scared. So you push demand out. And then you stop hiking. And so a lot of those people who are waiting, sitting on their hands, waiting to see what happens, they gain a little bit more confidence and they start going out there and looking again. And so that's why you're seeing housing prices push up across the country. Also, you just added 1 million people to a country. What did you really think was going to happen? Let's look at the year-over-year chart. So the headline here is year-over-year, we're still down. Month over month, we are up. So this is for detached homes. You can see Toronto Central down 4%, Toronto West down 11%, and Toronto East down 7%. Burlington down 15% year over year, Brampton down 12%, Oakville doing pretty well at 5%. Head over to the month over month chart and the picture gets a lot more rosy. It's green, lots of green, and we like green. So we're seeing, Toronto Central up 8%, West and East up 6% and 4% respectively. So anywhere from, changes of 2 to 5% month over month, which is a pretty big move on a monthly chart, right? Same story for condos. Year over year, we are down, right? So CO1, your sort of downtown Toronto district, down 5% year over year. But of course, and I like to point this out because I think it's somewhat important, is like buying power has been reduced a whole lot more than 5% as a function of rate hikes, right? So affordability is far worse today than it was back then, even at our lower prices today. And I think that's worth noting, right? Because it tells you that the average Toronto homeowner seems to have a lot of staying power, which is surprising given the percentage of variable rate mortgages that are out there. But it's also important to remember that, look, I think the number is it's either 42 or 44. Either 42 or 44% of Toronto households have no mortgage. Right? The property's paid off. There's a lot of people sitting on a ton of equity with paid off properties, right? So it's really the people who bought in the last 2 or 3 years that are really feeling the pinch right now. Again, condos month over month, a much happier story here. You're seeing prices push up in all areas except for CO8. If you're not familiar, CO8 is like CO1. So CO1 is the downtown core, right? It is your center of the Canadian universe, right? Is the nucleus of Canada. And then CO8 is like the east side. So it's very, very close in proximity to the nucleus of Canada. It's just a little rougher around the edges, right? It's a little bit more homeless. The streets are a little bit more potholy, if that's a word. But again, just, it's 1 month of data. I wouldn't read too much into that. Here is the sticking point, though. A lot of us in the industry seem to think that in the last 2 weeks, there's been a shift, and we feel like it's slowing down a little bit. At least that's what you'll hear on Twitter, which is really interesting on the heels of our CPI report. So if you look at inflation, it printed 4.4% versus 4.1% expected. And when you look at the basket and you look at the breakdown and the weighting, turns out that the increase in mortgage servicing, right? So the increase in mortgage cost because of the rate hikes contributed to almost 30% of our higher inflation year over year. So what does this really mean? I don't know. I'm not an economist. But what I can tell you is that those of us, myself included, who are hoping for rate cuts in the near future, we're probably going to be sadly let down, right? So I don't think we're going to see cuts this year. That's just the reality. Inflation is proving more sticky. Everybody on Twitter told me it would. I didn't want to believe it, but here we are today. With that being said, I think if we get another quarter point hike, I really don't think it's going to do that much damage to the housing market. Now, this would not be a Jordan real estate video if I didn't somehow work in a way or a method of quoting myself in my video. And so I thought this exchange on Twitter was really interesting. If you're somebody who feels the need to know what's happening in the housing market second by second, Twitter is where you need to be, because by the time it makes it to the headlines in the Globe and Mail and the Bloomberg, by the time they call me to quote me and print that article, or they call Dan to quote him or Jason to quote him, it's already 60 to 90 days after we've made our assumptions of what's going on in the market. So if you really care that much about the housing market, join Twitter. With that being said, it's also a negative cesspool, but putting that aside, some good information on there. Jason is involved with Zolo.ca, okay? Zolo.ca is one of Canada's largest resale real estate portals. And of course, I'm involved with Precondo.ca, which is one of Canada's largest pre-construction real estate portals, right? So we see far less traffic than him, but we see it all in pre-construction. He sees far more than us, but it's all in resale. So we both get a very early look in consumer sentiment in those two respective markets, right? What Jason's seeing is he's seeing a 10% reduction off the top in platform showing requests. And I'm seeing a very similar thing in presentation center bookings for pre-construction. Now, this does tend to happen when the weather gets better and we have long weekends. So who really knows? It may be a reduction in demand. It may mean that, the tailwind is gone in the housing market or is starting to slow down a little bit. Who knows? Remains to be seen. I would love to know what you guys think. Leave it in the comments below. Are we going to rip higher, or is our little run here in housing prices over for this year? Switching it up to pre-construction briefly, new condo sales down 74% year over year. Quite the headline, right? But you also have to remember that first quarter of 2022 was also the highest pre-construction sales volume in decades in Toronto, right? So anything off of that is going to look pretty poor. Generally speaking, we expect 4,000 to 4,500 units to sell in the first quarter. Really 4,000 to 5,000 units. That's like a normal year in pre-construction in the GTA, right? This year we saw 2,400. So running at about half the volume we would expect, which of course, again, makes sense, right? You don't have a lot of investors they're pumping the brakes. They're looking at the market. They're not sure how it's going to play out. They don't want to make that speculative bet on pre-construction, and I can understand that. And really what it comes down to is the fact that the cost to build these things hasn't come down. Cost of construction is still up. I mean, some materials have come down, but labor hasn't, right? Development levies are up and land costs haven't really adjusted yet. So the cost to build a condo hasn't come down, so you can't expect the price to come down, right? And then, of course, you look over here and you see, look, Jordan's selling the truth, because the average unsold price per square foot is higher than it's ever been, hovering around $1,400 in the GTA. Not specifically Toronto, but across the GTA, the average price per square foot for inventory out there right now is $1,400 a square foot. But again, like I said, 6 weeks ago, the market started shifting aggressively, not just in the resale market, but also in the pre-construction market. And we saw this happen. So Union City launched up in Markham. They sold 850 condos in 6 days. Look, the reality, honestly, guys, they could have sold all 850 units in 6 minutes if they felt like it. It was pandemonium, right? It was absolutely nuts. I'm in a bunch of WhatsApp groups with a bunch of other pre-construction brokers, and everyone was like, I've got 5, 10 clients and drafts ready. Anybody have any units left over? I'll take anything. My clients will sign for anything. They were oversubscribed 8-1 on 1-bedrooms, meaning that for every 1-bedroom there was available, there were 8 people with bank drafts hoping to get that unit. And then shortly after this launch, we had a launch in Oakville from Mattamy in the Oakville Preserve community for about $1,100 a square foot, parking included. And the 1-bedroom rents at Dundas and Trafalgar, believe it or not, they're $2,300 a month. So it's a really good offering, right? Because you're getting almost Toronto rents, but you're getting it at $1,100 a square foot instead of $1,700 a square foot, which is what you'll pay pre-construction for the same unit in Toronto or in downtown Toronto. And so that one was massively oversubscribed as well. And I think a lot of this really does come down to the rent gap shrinking. And I have a video coming on that tomorrow. So if you aren't already subscribed, please do. And I'll see you guys next video.